Uck. This is why I don't go out of the city. The sand is fucking everywhere. Rebecca grumbled. We had taken a pit stop a few hours into the drive to let everyone hit the bathroom if they needed, and poor Rebecca got the worst of it. Well, you aren't supposed to press your ass into the sand, I joked back, and she glared at me. Rebecca's squeals as she had lost her balance while out squatting in the desert had gotten me to come running, only to break down into a laughing fit when I found her on her back legs in the air after falling over. Fuck off. How much longer anyways? She grumbled at me, arms crossed, but it wasn't very threatening, more cute. Not too far. Dakota gave us the exact info. Seriously, these Raffen should know better. I offered back. The gig was easy enough. A small band of Raffen had kidnapped the daughter of some rich woman in the city. The stupid girl had come out to party in the Badlands, and the Raffen had gone through and took everyone mid-party to ransom them back. But this girl's parents were more interested in sending a message than sending eddies. Which worked for me. I waved at Hiromi, who waved back at me. The whole crew was moving on this gig, just in different cars, but this time Rebecca was with me instead of Hiromi. Ichi once again was stuck driving the truck as we headed out. I wasn't sure how much loot these Raffen would have, but I was going to find out. All done? As done as I can be, Rebecca grumbled, as she climbed back into the car. Then we were off. Our little convoy continued on. As we moved, I went over the information Dakota had given me. Like normal, the Raffen had taken over some old buildings in the desert and were using it to hold their hostages. Technically the gig only cared about the one girl, but I planned on cleaning up the entire group, and so I would have to worry about the hostages as well. I had come up with a plan that I think would work, and this time it really would be mostly about me. I would go in first, infiltrate, find the hostages, and then secure them. Then once I was done, I would call it in, and the rest of the team would move in, and altogether we would take out the rest of the forces with me working as netrunner support to ensure the hostages wouldn't be harmed. As we turned off the main road, and onto a dirt path, I kept an eye out for our contact. Dakota had been keeping an eye on the Raffen for the last 3 days after the kidnapping. She had been putting together a team to rescue the hostages, but hadn't taken care of until we had shown up. Seriously, I was going to have to talk to her. She could have let me know about this gig without us reaching out. Or more likely I knew, I needed to talk to Hiromi about setting up a fixer connection. If Hiromi was talking to all of them, or seeing what gigs they needed done, she could poke me about good gigs and Section 9 could take them on. I was lazy when it really came down to it. I had plenty of eddies, and not a lot of things I was planning on buying, so I kept putting off taking more and more gigs. Which, thinking about it, was rather stupid. I did want to get a full body conversion at some point, even with all the politics involved in that level of cyberware. Stupid full body restrictions. Blah blah, had to have someone vouch for you, blah blah. I'd probably just put in the paperwork saying I worked for Hiromi and that would be that. One of the benefits of having a tune so into the corpo network. I slowed and pulled off, seeing the man sitting at an old bus stop with a dirt bike that was our contact. All right, we're here, I muttered, and Becca perked up, looking suddenly excited. Finally. I was waiting for this. She cried and stepped out as soon as my car stopped. Really, I was going to have to talk to her about the seatbelt thing. I stepped out and noticed Malcolm's car pulled up behind us. The rocket launchers on the top of the thing always distracted me whenever I saw them. Stupid dibs, that was supposed to be my rocket launcher car. Ichi's truck pulled up behind that, and Hiromi behind him. You lot. Section 9? The man asked, and I felt my face brighten into a smile before I calmed it, and went stone-faced. We are. You are Milton, Dakota's contact. I greeted him in turn as I approached him. Where is the compound? It's an old farmhouse. Just up the road. I've never been in it before, but from what I was able to gather, it has a basement. That's likely where the hostage is, he explained, sending over some fairly basic data about the insides, but brand new pictures of what it looked like from the outside and above. The man must have a drone or something. All right. We'll take it from here, unless you have anything else? Nothing that Dakota wanted to pass along. He offered with a shrug, and then just settled back into the bus stop. Feet up on the bike. relaxing back as if planning on just waiting to see what would happen. I thought about commenting, but it wasn't worth it, or important. "All right, suit up," I called out as I turned, and I got nods from everyone besides Rebecca, who looked confused, before I smiled at her, and took a moment to pull out the case of her armor from the trunk right alongside my own. "Suit up," I told her, and she looked a little hesitant, as she took it. "Hiromi and the boys can help you get it on," I told her. "Don't stress about it, it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it," Hiromi added as she walked over to help. "Yeah, sure. Can't be too hard," Rebecca admitted, sounding more sure of herself. "All right, go ahead and arm up as well. I'm going to head in first," I told them already, pulling on my chest rig, strapping it in, as I started securing my weapons and equipment. Everyone got to it. Hiromi walking Rebecca through suiting up. It thankfully let me focus on preparing. Attaching the silencer onto my copperhead, I nodded as it was secured. Time to get to work. I made the call connecting everyone together and then headed out into the desert. These guys wouldn't likely have any sensors in the desert, but I would still be heading in alone on foot, so I could try and find out before we got closer. Stomping through the desert once again, I wanted to laugh to myself at how often I found myself sliding through the sands outside Night City. The Raffen just couldn't help themselves, and I guess they were an easy target considering how rarely they would go into Night City. Low risk, high reward. I controlled my breathing, moved cautiously, and let myself fall into a rhythm, checking everything as I stalked closer and closer. Soon enough I crested a ridge and could see the farmhouse, and the cars surrounding it in the distance. Staying low and hiding in the shadow of a bush, I sent up-to-date information to my team, marking the cars to focus on. More interesting was that I couldn't see any defenses. This place didn't even have cameras set up that I could see. Moving over the ridge after making sure no one had eyes on me, I moved closer and closer, lining up with a section of the backside of the farmhouse that didn't have any windows. I approached closer and closer, until I quietly leapt over the fence that surrounded the property. "I'm in," I confirmed to the team. There was no hesitation. This wasn't my first infiltration. I followed along the back of the house until I was on the shadowed side, then slowly peeked in through the armored windows. It was a kitchen, and it was empty so far that I could see. Taking a moment, I gathered as much about the layout of the house as I could before moving on. I didn't trust the window guards to not squeal if I opened them, so that wasn't my entrance. Everything was so old and rusted that I would have to worry about noise, which meant the front was the best access point. Sliding along the wall, I peeked around at the cars. None of them were on, but with their crystal dome it was impossible to tell if someone was inside them with their doors closed. This would be so much easier if I could get eyes on someone and just ping them. Slipping through the shadows, I crouched and made my way to the front door. It was unlocked, and an old-style door, instead of one of the electrical doors that were so popular in Night City. I crouched up to it, and slowly opened it, peeking inside. The front hallway was empty, but I could hear sounds of a TV playing. Obviously these guys had gotten some power going. I slipped inside, closing the front door silently behind me. I felt the cold flow through me. Time to move and find the hostages. The assumption was they were downstairs, but this farmhouse did have a second floor as well. I'd check down, but have to be careful about what was above me. Sliding along the wall, I came to the first opening. On the right, the hallway opened into a living room, where the sound of the TV was coming from, and there was a small door to the left to the kitchen I had seen before. Further down the hall was a few other rooms, and stairs up. Where was the basement entrance? I prepared myself and peeked around the corner into the living room. Instantly I engaged my Sandevistan. The couch was facing the doorway, the TV was up against the wall I was against, and there was a Raffen sitting on the couch drinking a beer. I moved, even as his eyes widened in surprise at seeing me. My knife came out, and before his voice could make a sound I chucked it. The knife moved through the air like it was in slow motion. Then it crashed into the man's throat. I was right behind it. The metal cut off his cry of alarm, as I grabbed the hilt of the blade and jerked it out, tearing his throat out and silencing him permanently. My Sandy turned off and I pushed the man down into the couch so he would bleed out into it, instead of on top of me. 100 blades XP gained. 500 XP gained. I waited, listening urgently for any noise. A ruffle, a cough, the sound of a boot on flooring. Nothing. I released the corpse and turned up the TV a bit. Unfortunately I hadn't pinged him before the murder, so I was still going in blind. Idly I noticed my Sandervist and didn't feel too bad. It was still warm, but that was the actual chrome's heat, and not my nerves on fire. I shifted my neck a bit as I checked the room. I felt good. My eyes roved over the room, before I noticed that it had a strange shape. Instead of being square or rectangular, there was a harsh angle in the corner. The same corner that would be across from the stairs up. I think that was where the basement access was. Heading back out of the living room, I moved quietly down the hall, copperhead raised. Knife was quieter, but if things got bad I was ready to fire. There across from the stairs was a door, and as I gently opened it up, I found the basement stairs. I found the basement. Heading down now, moving. Then I slowly went inside, testing each step to make sure none of the construction creaked as I slipped down. It wasn't dark though. No, the lights were on, and as I headed down I heard it before seeing. The sounds of quiet crying. I slipped farther down and caught sight of the situation. A large basement, well lit, with a pile of teenagers tucked into a corner sitting on the floor. It looks like they had been given access to a small bathroom nearby, but that was the extent of their comfort. Then there were the Raffen watching them. One guy was sitting at the base of the stairs in a big chair with a tactician. No one saw me yet as I was just peeking through the small gap where the stairs left the ceiling. I quickly breached into the Raffen, and then when that was done, sent a ping through. The golden light branched off and I noticed that he wasn't alone. There was another light leading near him in a corner of the basement I couldn't see. 2 of them. Then another 3 lights upstairs. I connected the information into the network with my tunes, so Section 9 would have the information on where the Raffen were. Now what to do? Even silenced my copperhead would make noise. A bullet smacking into concrete tended to make noise. Then again the hostages would make noise when I appeared as well. They always do. I gave myself 4 seconds to come to a decision, and in the end got up and moved bouncing off the stairs, so I landed at the bottom, skipping everything in between, and giving the Raffen no time. Sandervisten activated, and I once again felt the warmth on my neck, but it wasn't as bad. Then I moved. I backflipped, landing on the back of the large chair, behind the first Raffen, my knife slipping into and then out of his throat in a single motion as I kicked off again. Bouncing off the wall I saw where the second Raffen was. A couch settled into a corner facing a TV, although it wasn't on this time. He was just starting to react, as I leapt, his eyes dilating, in slow time as his brain registered the movement. Registered that something was there. Something dangerous. The adrenaline spiked, his brain sparked, but it was all far too slow. I landed on top of him, bodily pushing him into the couch for a second before simply stepping away, his throat now ripped open, leading his life to trail out over his dirty shirt. Sandervisten off, a burning fire up my neck told me I was at my limit. 500 XP gained. 100 athletics XP gained. 500 XP gained. I almost laughed at the odd XP. I guess doing backflips counted. Focusing on the hostages, who were also just starting to react, and raised a hand to where my lips were hidden under my helmet. A single finger telling them to be quiet. I didn't move for a few moments, letting them all register what was happening and see my motion. It mostly worked. A few gave squeals of shock at the sudden death, and at my appearance, but the ones that were smart shushed their fellows, and soon the entire room was quiet again. Taking a few quiet steps forward, I returned to the stairs and waited, my directional microphone pointed upwards, trying to catch anything. It was quiet. The 3 lines of light leading above didn't shift. Nodding, I turned to the hostages. That was more people than expected. I had thought we were talking about 4 or 5, but this was more like 20 hostages stuck down here. I ignored them though, instead focusing back up the stairs as I could hear the sounds of vehicles approaching. Section 9 was here. I felt myself grow a sinister grin as I raced back up the stairs, setting up at the entrance to the basement with my copperhead pointing towards the stairs. I could hear the Raffen upstairs tumbling around, hearing the sound of approaching engines that weren't their own. And I prepared myself. Let's go. Ha 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 ha. A familiar voice rang out and suddenly a roar started up. I could hear the rounds slamming into the second floor as Rebecca opened fire with the Ichi special. Ichi had set up the behemoth for a quick mount of his HMGs. So of course that would be where Rebecca ended up. I could hear the hostages below cry out in fear at the sound, but they were completely safe. The HMG was firing up into the second floor. I could see the golden lights flicker out as the HMG rounds punched straight through the old farmhouse. In the end, 2 of the lights flickered before the HMG went silent. You know it's a pain in the ass to reload those things, right? I asked over the line as I raced upwards. Oh, come on. Do you have any idea how long I've been wanting to let loose with one of these babies? Militex Mark 31 is practically my dream. I want to keep firing. Itchy. Reload. Please. Not a chance. I'm safe in here. Armored cab. Alright, clear comms. I'm going after the last one. I offered back, fighting my desire to laugh at Rebecca's cherry-sweet pleading towards Itchy. Malcolm had rushed in as soon as the guns stopped and formed up behind me as we went upstairs. Might have to talk to him about getting some lynx paws. He was a bit loud, but it didn't matter. We found the last Raffen hiding in a bathroom that somehow had kept the rounds from reaching him. He died quickly enough with a couple shots of the copperhead. 500 XP gained. This is a mess. I grumbled as I grabbed what was left in the fridge the Raffen had stored up and took it downstairs. These kids weren't just from one kidnapping. It was more like 3. The Raffen had the bright idea of setting up parties in the Badlands and then coming in and kidnapping anyone that had eddies. So some of the kids had been stuck out here for more than a week, and the Raffen weren't doing a great job of feeding and watering them. Made worse with the fact those that were still here after a few days meant their parents weren't able, or planning on actually paying the ransom. Why waste food and water on dead kids after all? Fucking scum. Alright, I got some more food here. I called out as I stomped down the stairs. Technically we were only here for one person, but I wasn't so cold that I would leave these people to die. Malcolm was actually doing a damn good job playing hero. Having gone downstairs to check on them, he had worked to get them all comfortable, getting them food and water. More than a few of the teens closer to our age were making doe eyes at the big damn hero. It was cute. On the other hand, as I walked down, there was a sudden tenseness in the atmosphere. I guess my cold-blooded murder of the 2 Raffen had left an impression. None of the teens seemed brave enough to want to interact with me. Thanks. Malcolm offered, grabbing the food and drink from my arms and starting to pass it out. Ichi had already commandeered Rebecca, and they were going through everything they could find for loot. Although I had noticed Rebecca giving the vehicles outside strong looks, I already knew which one she would take too. There was a nice Archer quartz that she had been keeping an eye on. The little 2-seater would fit Rebecca perfectly. Either way, I was more focused on helping Malcolm. After the food and drink was handed over, Malcolm continued to act as the face, calming everyone down as he assured them he would get everyone back to the city without any issue. Eventually everything calmed down. I found our actual target, and sent a picture to Dakota confirming rescue. She would be sending a truck to pick her up, and then the rest of the kids were our responsibility if we wanted to do something. I headed back up, to check in with Itchy, who didn't look enthused. We aren't getting much out of this one, Motoko. The vehicles, a few things of value inside, what they were wearing, and that's about it. They didn't bother to set anything up here. He explained as I met up with him and Rebecca searching through the old rooms. Can't win them all. It's fine, we did this mostly for Rebecca anyways. I offered, shrugging, and the girl looked up as her name was called, before looking a little pleased. Thanks, Choom. She offered and I smiled back at her before remembering I was wearing my helmet still. Taking it off, I gave her a smile in return. Alright, find what we can, and load it up in the other vehicles first. I think the behemoth is mostly going to be full of our friends downstairs. Dakota isn't going to take them? Ichi asked, and I shook my head. Apparently she was only paid for the one, and doesn't care. They are our responsibility. I answered back with a grumble. It would have been a lot easier if we didn't have to transport 22 people. Well, at least we'll have room, Ichi said, looking around the room and the complete lack of loot piles. Yeah, alright, you two finish up. I'm going to make sure we have water for our friends on the trip. I headed back out, and went in search. It's not like I could use the taps. The water was awful, so I would have to find something else. There was probably an old SCSM somewhere. Alright, everyone up. Slow and steady now. I called out as we were guiding the people into the behemoth. There was an understandable hesitation in wanting to enter the massive truck. Hey, it's alright. We'll be heading into Night City to drop you all off. It's not like there are buses out this far, yeah? Malcolm called out, reassuring everyone as he even ran up and climbed onto the back of the behemoth. I'll be in the back with you. Come on. Let's go home. He shouted, and that got them moving. I shrugged. Malcolm had done a better job than I had in getting the hostages to relax. He jumped into the back of the truck with them, to be their contact as Ichi started up the truck. I would drive my Quadra, Hiromi would drive Malcolm's car. And Rebecca? I looked over and blanched. That is not what I expected you to pick. I whispered to myself. Rebecca had not jumped into the Archer Quartz, the little two-seater that I thought she had been eyeing. No, she had jumped into a massive Thornton Mackinac. The same truck Pan Am drove, only Pan Am was normal-sized. Rebecca looked like a kid while sitting in the driver's seat, but I couldn't deny her massive grin was rather telling. I walked over and climbed up to see what she was up to. And I laughed as she was working on the switches and things on the dash. Trying to figure it all out? It's a lot, she argued, flashing a little embarrassed at her confusion. No worries. That one is the crystal dome opacity. That one is the wheel differential. That one's the scanner. I started, and each time I waited for Rebecca to play with the switches to get a feel for what it did. That one I have no idea. Some custom option probably. I offered, and of course Rebecca flipped the protector on the steering wheel and hit the switch. The roar of two machine guns built into the front of the truck went off and absolutely destroyed an old shed next to the farmhouse. We both went silent for a moment. FFFF ha 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 ha. Rebecca broke into horrendous goblin laughter as she realized her new truck had weapons. Of course it has weapons. I mumbled, why did my Quadra not have weapons? I should attach weapons. This is awesome. Rebecca roared out, and I couldn't help but smile at her. I was just happy, she was happy. The trip back to the city wasn't too bad. We had to stop a few times for bathroom breaks for the hostages, but Malcolm had stayed with them specifically to be able to reach us in case something like that was needed. Ichi didn't want someone peeing in his truck. When we all reached the city, we released everyone at the first bus stop, which while half were relieved we weren't kidnapping them, the other half complained about us leaving them on the edge of the city and not driving them all home. Pretentious little shits. Luckily no one pushed past complaining, and we were soon on our way. The small bits of loot we had gathered would be dropped off for Hiromi to sell, and Dakota had already taken the other vehicles we had left behind, adding a bit of eddies for the gig. More interesting though was Rebecca. We had given Rebecca a monster truck. I kinda regret everything now, I mumbled, as I watched her drive off, nearly driving over another car that was driving too slow. Rebecca was splitting off to get her car painted and registered, and then she had said she really wanted to show it off to her brother. In the end I was pretty happy with how everything had worked out. Dropping off the loot didn't take long, and 20 minutes later we were all gathered up at Lizzie's for an after-gig party. After the party I headed home, flopping onto my bed and passing out for the night. I woke up the next morning without much to do, so I ended up settling onto the couch and messing around with some quick hacks. There was a lot that I still wanted to work on. My netrunning resources still weren't complete, but the fact was, a lot of the high-end stuff I wanted to do was out of reach still. My mind often ran back to the Laughing Man, from Ghost in the Shell. The ability to in real time hack into someone and change what they were seeing. The Major even used it to make herself invisible in a later episode, but the complexity of something like that was beyond me. If I wanted invisibility I would need to somehow hunt down some optical camo, which was basically impossible to find. It was a cyberware that was rarely put out on the market, as it was highly coveted. Any stealth solo wanted optical camo. Imagine a thief that could go invisible. Of course they would want it. Unfortunately I would have to take out some Arasaka ninja, or Militech hitman to get my hands on it at this rate. So since neither option was reasonable, I was stuck doing something else. Currently I was cleaning up another request from Yoko. Someone wanted a skeleton key to a network. Basically, they didn't have a netrunner good enough to breach into the system themselves, but they still needed to get in. That's where I came in. They sent the data to Yoko, and she passed it off to me, as a test. Well, really it was more that she just didn't want to do the work, I think. But it was alright. She promised me some favors for the work, and it wasn't really hard. I knew exactly where the security system was weak, and with a bit of work, I had a quick hack that was small enough even some Reza could breach through the system. I sent it off to Yoko, but only after sneaking a little bit of code into it, that would basically blow confetti into her face when she opened the file. She might have thought it was slick to send along a demon into the information packet she had sent me, but I was pretty sure she wouldn't catch my little present until it blew up in her face. I could only hope she was around other people on the net when it happened. Stretching as I rose up from the couch, I noticed June was missing. Him and Aghari had been disappearing together a lot recently, but it was all because of that little shit that tried to get June into trouble. June might not want me tracking him and killing him, but I swear if June had any further blowback over this nonsense, I would hunt that little shit down, old friend or not. I was just thinking about going out and grabbing a bite to eat when I got a call from Hiromi. "What's up, Hiromi?" "Motoko. Okay, listen. You need to turn on the radio. Right now. Go to Growl FM. 89.7. This is huge." She squealed into the phone, and suddenly I felt a disturbance. "Hiromi, what did you do?" "I talked to a ton of people. Radio now. It's almost time. Ash said it would be coming up next." I blinked, because what station was Growl FM? I don't remember it from the game. Was it gone by then? Then because I knew what I was going to hear, I glanced over to the radio and flicked it on with a quick breach. Of course that doesn't mean Biotechnica are innocent in this. The Securisin reveal will be a black mark the Corp may never recover from. Or from their last stock prices, they already have. That's the truth of the game, folks. Anyway, here is an amazing amateur track that was played last week at a little dive called Red Dirt. I want to introduce the whole city to Ghost in the Shell, and this will be, Smells Like Teen Spirit. I need to sit down. I stumbled over and managed to flop into the couch as my song started playing. I could hear Hiromi chattering away in my ear, but I was too shocked at what was happening to properly hear her. My version of Nirvana was on the radio and Hiromi had set this up. It was a copy of the BD track. I could hear the distortions of the club, people chattering and talking and singing along in the back. It was like a live track almost. Well, the quality wasn't all there, too much deterioration from the mediums, but it was okay. It was okay. I'm okay. This was okay. Right. If I told myself that, I would believe it. The song finished. So that's the first track that was played, and I'd say the artist Ghost in the Shell? Apparently it's the whole thing? Whatever, it's Nova. I liked it. I'll probably try out the other tracks from this set as well. Quality isn't great, but that's the name of the game with our pirate station, isn't it? Anyway, let's switch over to something a bit older. I flicked the radio off. Believe she agreed. I talked to Judy, and she talked to Rita, and Rita apparently knows Ash, which I guess should be obvious. She is a Mox after all. So Rita put the Hiromi Motoko. You are still there. I was starting to get worried, you know. Hiromi. Yes? I honestly don't know whether to cry or scream at you right now. I'll talk later. I hung up. Then I flopped over into the couch and screamed into the cushions. A few hours later, after ignoring phone calls, I had told Hiromi to meet me. The fact was I didn't wait for her to come up though. The moment she had parked her car and headed to the elevator, I was inside. As the doors opened, she startled for a moment, seeing me right on the other side of the metal doors. We need to talk, I informed her, and then hooked my arm around her elbow and tugged her inside. Motoko, hey, she muttered before realizing I was smiling at her. I'm sorry I didn't ask before going through with it, but I was put in touch with Ash, and it was a 1 in a million chance. I had to accept. I didn't answer as the elevator started up without me pushing a button. As if I hadn't hacked into the building security and had my own overrides by now. The elevator ride was quiet as Hiromi seemed to realize I wasn't responding and she started fidgeting. Finally the elevator reached our floor and I dragged Hiromi along, her faint resistance nowhere near enough to slow me down, before I entered the apartment and finally let her go. Then I started pacing, not even heading to the couch. "What the fuck, Hiromi?" I demanded, and she jerked. "Why, I just wanted your song to get big." "That's not the problem here," I told her. "You know I'm uncomfortable with this. I only agreed to the Red Dirt gig because I think I was ready for that. I was ready to try it, and see how it worked, but this. I wasn't ready for this, Hiromi. You pushed past my boundaries and you didn't even ask." She opened her mouth to respond before closing it. "I know. I didn't ask, because if I did, I knew you wouldn't be ready for it, and the opportunity would be gone. So I just did it. I knew you'd be mad. But I hoped I could convince you this is a good thing. An opportunity like this was huge." "I'm not mad it's on the radio, Hiromi. I'm mad you did it behind my back. I trust you. Completely. You handle all my eddies practically, and I never second guess, or check to see if you are cheating me or something, because I don't have to. Because I trust you," I told her, and my words had their intended effect. Hiromi flinched, her face paling a bit as I stopped pacing and just stood in front of her, glaring at her until the overconfident demeanor shifted into the real Hiromi. "I just wanted to. I wanted to be your manager, and get your career started, and I wanted it," she slowly whispered out, and I nodded. "I know. Your desire to keep pushing for more is one of your cute points," I admitted, then I stepped in to wrap her in a hug. Honestly, I wasn't that mad. Not really, not about the song on the radio. My words had been the truth. I was more hurt Hiromi would do this behind my back, despite knowing I wouldn't be okay with it. But I also knew that Hiromi wasn't perfect. She made mistakes just like I did, and she wasn't trying to be malicious. She was just fixated on improvements, and growth, and sometimes that blinded her. "Hiromi, you're one of the few people I trust completely. I don't know, I won't break that over something like this, but I hope you'll treat my trust with a bit more gentleness from now on," I told her, still hugging her tightly. "I will," she whispered into my neck, hugging me back tightly. "Great. Good." I nodded and stepped back. "You are my manager after all. I don't think I can find a better one, especially one that I can actually trust, so we'll have to make this work." She nodded, her eyes watery, but not quite falling into tears yet. Okay. So, my song. On the radio. I started pacing again. "You said they wanted a studio version, Ash?" "Yeah," she said, "the live version is okay, but if you want it to really blow up, we need a studio version." Hiromi spoke softly, her voice gaining strength now that I wasn't letting what happened come between us. "Fuck. I don't know if I want to do this," I muttered, still pacing. "Okay, Motoko, cost benefits. The costs are, people might start knowing me. The benefits? Eddies? Hiromi will get more experience dealing with high-end deals with something I don't really care that much for. If someone tricks us and ends up with lots of eddies or something, I'll just let it go, or kill them depending on how bad it is. The benefits of my wide range of skills. So. Okay. Let's set up an appointment for Denny's studio." "I can do that," Hiromi confirmed with a fierce look on her face, excitement filling her now that I had accepted. I watched as her eyes flashed gold as she started making a call, and I kept pacing for a while. I never expected this rockaboy thing to get this big. I was just doing it for fun, and I mean, sure, hearing my own voice on the radio had been. Well, it was kinda flattering, and cool. If horrifying as well. But was this what I wanted? Rockaboy Motoko? I considered it, cold blood flowing over me for a second. I wanted to think about this without a single emotion getting in the way. I had decided to become a merc because eddies, and because it seemed to be the right path. I liked it. I enjoyed the challenge, and the growth and the killing. As fucked up as that was. Music. I enjoyed that too. I liked it, it was a rush, and fun, and it was the only way I would be able to hear some songs that I missed. So was I going to try it out as a career? It would take a lot of time away from. Well, I blinked, realizing my schedule wasn't limited by anything. I mean, eventually I was planning on getting a Gemini, and with my healing, and with technology improving, I might end up living for a very, very long time. I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking or moving. I didn't do that anymore thanks to the Cool Nerves perk, but even without it I don't think I would be showing any signs. I would do this, see how it goes, let Hiromi push it as hard as she could, and in exchange I would spend some time, make some music, and if it doesn't work, I just go back to killing like normal. Who cares if I succeed or fail? The fact that it didn't matter, that I didn't need to be anxious about trying out a new career, that its success simply didn't matter. It was kind of freeing. Okay. I got a slot in an hour.